The Sine Institute of Policy and Politics is American University's incubator for policy innovation. We convene leaders in the academic, public, private, nonprofit, and journalism sectors to engage and promote common ground and nonpartisan solutions. In an evolving world, we seize the opportunity to work on the nation's most pressing challenges through collaboration by experts and top scholars in their field with students in research and scholarship. As part of that goal, the Sine Institute leverages American University's location in our nation's capital, the nexus of government and a growing international business center. We connect diverse perspectives from around the country and around the world with our world-class academics and research, experienced practitioners, and the most politically active student body in the U.S. We stand apart through our focus on the role of business and the nonprofit community in public policy, the rise of the importance of economic regions in the United States, and international policy issues. Our focus is to make an immediate impact at the intersection of policy and politics that leads to real and lasting change. Thank you for joining us as we convene, communicate, and collaborate.
Thank you so much for joining us on Sine's first official field trip event. Woo! Thank you. And please welcome our last seminar with Ms. Daniella Senior.
Yes, hi guys. Very excited to have you here in my home this time around rather than in the classroom. Hopefully the snacks are keeping you happy. So this is the last seminar discussion on the impactful role of immigrant women within food systems and their communities. Thank you all that have joined me in this journey as we explored the rich tapestry of contributions that immigrant women make to the vibrant food landscapes and how these contributions, extend far beyond the kitchen. In our previous seminars, we've explored a number of things. Number one, the contributions of immigrant women in food systems, and honestly, how these contributions are really unquantifiable, and how their efforts often go unnoticed, overshadowed by systemic inequalities and biases. Many immigrant women face a lot of barriers, including language, discrimination, harassment, lack of information, and it ultimately really impacts how they can be impactful in food systems. The lack of data in the subject and research is really, I feel, one of the systematic problems. Until we have this data, we can't really quantify the impact. In our second seminar, we explored supply chain and how immigrant women have a pivotal role in shaping the future of our food, as they really have an impact in implementing regenerative practices and prioritize our planet. And today, we are going to be talking about community. So in every corner of the world, not only in the U.S., obviously, immigrant women are bringing a wealth of culinary traditions, skills, stories that enrich their adopted new homes. Their influences really extend far beyond food and gastronomy. It permeates the fabric of communities and touches upon issues of culture, economics, health, and social cohesion. Throughout our conversation today, we'll delve into the multifaceted ways in which immigrant women navigate and shape food systems. And I can't think of a better person than Dr. Ana Maria Jaramillo right here to join me in this conversation. So honestly, her work to share culinary traditions as well as the impact she's had on her community, it's truly inspiring. And I can't wait to jump on it. So, Ana Maria, sorry, she's my friend, Dr. Jaramillo. No, you worked hard for that PhD. So we'll call you as such. Why don't you share with the students how you got here. What's your story? You know, because I do believe it's so inspiring, and you know, you really do so much, and you're gonna hear a little bit about it, but you know, just why don't you introduce us first to who you are and how you got here?
Thank you. Says the person that does so much as well. So thank you, everybody. It's so great to be here and see all the students and faculty as well. So I have a very interesting background, I guess. My parents immigrated from Medellin, Colombia, to Monterrey, Mexico, which is northern Mexico. And I lived there until I was about 5 years old. My father was in school there. And then we crossed the border to a very tiny town called McAllen, which is part of the Rio Grande Valley. For those of y'all that are not familiar with it, being a border kid is like you didn't grow up in America. There are so many different ways of life because you live in America, but you hear Spanish all around you. And where I grew up, it was 98% Mexican American. So I was kind of a minority within minorities, right? Because I was Colombian, but I'd also grown up in Mexico. So that's a little bit about my heritage. And myself, I'm a pediatric bilingual speech language pathologist. So I went to school for a while to be that. I work with children that have multiple disabilities, some with genetic syndromes, autism, expressive language disorders, but I basically teach kids at my clinic, which is just 10 minutes from here, called Voice Speech Therapy, how to talk, how to swallow, and how to eat. So that's what a speech pathologist does in a nutshell. On top of that, I'm also an adjunct professor at GW, so I teach a course on autism, and I also teach a long course called Multicultural Issues in Human Communication. So we look at why our world is having so many communication breakdowns, how we can be better active listeners, and how we can understand each other's cultures and get to a point of cultural sensitivity and humility and not cultural competency, because that does not exist. You cannot be competent in any other culture other than your own, right? And then that brings me to how I got into the food world. So
Because she doesn't do it now.
My husband and I recently got married. He's always been in the food world since he was in his 20s. He's been front of house, back of house, but recently he was in catering for many years. And he helped open a catering company with his neighbor, and he got sick of it. And so we met. I took him to Texas, where I grew up. He tried breakfast tacos for the first time in his life, and he was blown away. He was like, first of all, what is this tortilla? I've never had a homemade flour tortilla in my life. Second of all, like, how do they get the eggs to be so fluffy and cheesy? And third of all, this doesn't exist in DC. And he's from Tacoma Park, so he's lived in DC his whole life. And he was like, Anna, if you and I work out long term, we have to open a Tex-Mex breakfast taco spot. And I was like, whatever. Like, everybody always says that. Like, you go to one restaurant, you want to bring it back to your house. No, it's never going to happen. I'm not in the food world. Well, the pandemic was the best thing that happened to us as a couple, because we were forced to figure out how to make ends meet. My speech therapy practice went under because a 2-year-old on teletherapy, it's not happening, right? They just slammed the laptop and they walked away. And the mom was like, sorry, maybe next week. I'm like, great. So I wasn't making any money there. So my husband was like, why don't we try to make tortillas at home? Everybody's making sourdough bread, and everyone's obsessed with this bread. Let's just do tortillas. And I was like, once again, like, you're not going to get it right, right? I'm so mean. Well, lo and behold, he made the most beautiful flour tortilla I ever had. We perfected it, and we started delivering our tortillas to people all over DC. It got out of control very quickly. We were selling like between 700 and 800 tortillas every Saturday, and we were delivering them for like 6 hours. We were also losing money because we were only selling them for $10 a dozen, free delivery. Okay? It made absolutely no sense economically, but we just wanted people to know, like, hey, we're here. So then actually immigrant woman herself, Simone, who is the daughter of Chef Jojo, who owned Sami on 8th Street, which was the only Burmese restaurant. She tried one of our tacos at a pop-up, and she fell in love with them. And she was like, hey, do y'all want to pop up at Sami every single Sunday indefinitely? And we were like, yeah, that's amazing. Nobody's ever given us an opportunity like this. So there we were making our tacos. We had like 4 or 5 tacos on the menu. Everything was pre-ordered. And a Washington Post writer came in and he tried the tacos. And he said we were the top 3 best tacos in DC. And then ever since then, we blew up, quite literally. And we've been riding the wave ever since. We went from pop-up to pop-up to pop-up. We opened our brick and mortar in August of 2022. And we just won a Michelin bid, which is awesome. Totally unexpected. Thank you. And yeah, the shop is doing great.
Yeah. So yeah, no, which is amazing. I think you excluded from your story a little bit, but meaning like how people were lining up in the farmers markets, or like, guys, we're talking blocks and blocks of people waiting for these breakfast tacos, and now they still do, just now at your shop. So
That's right.
You know, if you haven't tried La Tejana, please go and visit them.
Yeah.
They're absolutely delicious.
Thank
but
you.
so as you can tell, Ana Maria is like touching people in all aspects, and including her speech pathology clinic both is the only bilingual clinic available like in this area as well. So really supporting something that's very crucial to everyone, but including women, just language, right? Language barriers. So she sees people from a food aspect and getting to interact with them that way, but also works with a lot of immigrants in her clinic and their children, and then sees a whole other aspect of the family dynamic, which is very, very important and often very underrated and underserviced. Which is why I feel like today you were such perfect for this conversation and the impact of the community. And I want to start with asking you if you can share some of your personal experiences that illustrate the impact of immigrant women and how they've been shaping food culture and their communities simultaneously.
Yeah, so I consider myself to be a first-generation immigrant because I moved here when I was 5, so I've lived in America most of my life, but I have a very strong connection to my Colombian culture. I go back 2 to 3 times a year. My parents live there half the year, and I also have a very close connection to Mexico because I lived there and I grew up on the border. But the first thing that comes to mind for the way that immigrant women have impacted my life on a personal level as well as the food culture is just with my own mother and my grandmother, right? So growing up, my father had a very, very busy job. He was never home, so I was basically raised by my mom with my 2 brothers. And no matter where we were, in what activity we had, like soccer, volleyball, swimming, whatever it was, we knew that at 8:30 p.m. on the dot, we all had to be at the dinner table. And my mom, like, God bless her, she worked so hard on every meal to make sure that we were eating, like, fully Colombian food because I was surrounded by Mexicans. And she never wanted me to forget that I was Colombian, which is hilarious because now I own a Tex-Mex restaurant. And we sell no Colombian food, and we never will. And so it's just funny, but she would always make these very traditional dishes, white rice, and then she would make sancocho, and she would make tamales colombianos, and she would just put so much emphasis on this check-in that we would have every night where we would ask each other, how are you doing today? What was something beautiful that happened in your day? What was a struggle that you had today? And there were no phones, nothing allowed at the table but us. And so I think in a lot of ways, food has always been a vessel of community in my life. It's never about the food, it's always about who shows up for the food and why you show up for the food. And so in my house, food was just a gathering place for us to understand each other more and to check in with each other. It was a dedicated amount of time that I think a lot of kids in America don't always get with their family, right? Because the cultural aspect is different. So that's my first, I think, like glimpse into that. The second is I have to talk about the women in my restaurant. And so the women in my restaurant, we are 95% immigrant women. If you go to the kitchen, you'll see my husband there, but you'll also see 5 badass, strong Central American women that are leading the kitchen. My husband is just on expo, but he lets them run the show. So I have Rosita. She's our lead line cook. She cooks all of our eggs. She's on the stove for 7 hours every single day that we're open, right? And she has 4 beautiful kids, 2 of which I have treated at my speech therapy clinic, which is amazing. One of them actually had these enormous tonsils and he was snoring and he couldn't breathe. And I was like, we got to get those tonsils out. And he went to emergency surgery a week later and he's sleeping so much better. His ADHD symptoms have decreased significantly because now he's able to rest. And so it's like seeing Rosita and Cynthia, who's our lead tortilla cook, seeing them for more than just our staff, right? Like it's more than just an employee or a cook. You are a human first and you have needs outside of Tejana. And how can I meet you where you are? At woman to woman, right? And so I think the way that we view all of our team is as equals. And I know that's very cliche, but at the end of the day, this is just a job for you, right? You are clocking in and clocking out, but I need to make sure that when you are there, that you feel safe, that you feel like you can come to me if you have any problem, right? We have loaned money to all of our team members because one of them needed a new roof and we loaned them money, right? We see them as an extension of us. Gus and I have a love partnership, but we also are business partners, and that becomes very hairy very quickly. I'm not even gonna lie to you, it's not always rainbow and butterflies, but we try to lead with example at La Tejana and really understand that these women have all gone through significant trauma to get to where they are today. And if we can help them just a little bit by seeing them as humans first, I think that changes like the attitude and motivation at the restaurant.
Well, I think that's paid off. How much turnover have you had at La Tejana since you
We have
opened?
had not a single person quit since 2022. Yes, we are a team of 12, and we just hired one more person, and nobody has left us. And it's incredible, right? Because again, it's more than just a paycheck. It's really showing up to work and knowing that you are okay in that environment, to be yourself, to ask questions, and to be vulnerable with things. I don't know, to me it comes as common sense, but in the food industry, these things are not common. I mean, Daniela knows more than me, but
They're not. You know, I think that's, but simultaneously, you know, I think it's a great case study because, you know, one of the things that most restaurants struggle with a lot is turnover, right? And it actually has a huge impact on costs, you know, when you can't keep and retain your team. And it's not only cost, right? It's obviously that transition periods are always uncomfortable, right? You're not operating at your highest level. You know, there's a level of ambiguity, and being able to have a stable team is, I think, is really crucial. And you know, again, you leading by example in these regards and being able to provide more than, I guess, standard to your team. And granted, you know, like the larger you grow, the things get more complicated, which is why a lot of companies, you know, start shifting. You're not able necessarily to like lend money to all of your employees because all of a sudden 12 become 100, right? And then you're like, okay, wait a minute, we have to set some ground rules. But I do think it definitely serves as an example of this, by prioritizing their needs, and basically all these immigrant women's needs, they've given you back so much, right?
So much.
And being able to, operate your business without any turnover, keeping happy guests, being able to be like, I can count on them, being fully vested. Like, and you said, yeah, they clock in and clock out, but see you guys, that's a family back there. That's not a clock in and clock out situation.
We hang out outside of work. We have like parties. We go bowling. We have a good time. We really like each other, like a lot. They're like my best friends, really.
But I think that piece of understanding is like, what if we actually meet immigrant women more than halfway, right? What if we are able to get past that paycheck and actually provide them with tools and resources and health? You're lucky that you're able to, obviously, again, provide those things that beyond the scope of the restaurant to your employees. But I'm sure that Rosita's kids, after now she can sleep because her son's tonsils got removed. I'm sure even her life quality has changed tremendously, because so it's really the lack of access to knowledge and healthcare and information ultimately is really what contributes to a lot of the systemic issues within our communities, and that it really have an impact on these women that are the backbones of our food systems. Yeah. So, thank you for the change that you make there and leading by example. So, all right, tell me a little bit more how you think these immigrant women contribute more to that culinary diversity, entrepreneurship, just kind of cultural exchange, but also what challenges they're faced with,
So I think if tomorrow every immigrant woman were to quit their job and boycott, our economy would absolutely collapse. So immigrant women are the forefront of not just food, but also education. They're also healthcare, admin. When you're talking about child care services, you're talking about any type of, even construction, right? Any type of job like that, there's usually an immigrant behind that, maybe an immigrant woman. I think it is so important for us to understand that they are the backbone of this country, and yes, move away from the motto of an immigrant can just get it done, right? That's not fair either, because then we're putting way too much pressure and we're not spending enough time looking at these systemic issues that make it so difficult for immigrant women to have basic human rights, like having basic healthcare needs met, feeling safe in their relationships, their partnerships. A lot of them flee their countries because they are in domestic abuse situations, and they come here for help, and they don't speak the language, they don't have health care, so they're not able to get what they need, and that becomes very difficult for a woman that has kids as well, right? And now has to work multiple jobs to take care of her kids. So I think when I think of different, beautiful, resilient examples of immigrant women, it's first of all the women that I work with every day, but also just if you look around DC, DC is a sanctuary city. DC has one of the highest number of immigrants and refugees in the country. We see so many Ethiopian women. Many of them have restaurants here. Many of them are the people that you see as soon as you walk into the restaurant. They themselves are seating you at your table. They're the ones getting to know who you are and why you came into the restaurant. We think about places like Bambini. So I work with this little school. It's literally around the corner on 20th and M. It is run completely by immigrant women, and it's one of the best Spanish immersion private daycares in the whole city. It's so hard to get in there, and you see who's running it, and it's women that have just moved here 5 years ago, and they've taken different courses to be able to teach and to be able to take care of kids. And I think, like, just thinking about the bigger picture in DC, we have to pay attention to how many people actually stop to talk and ask immigrant women what they need on the day-to-day, right? More than just, hey, are you good? Yeah, you showed up on time to your restaurant? Great. No, like, how are things going for you at home, right? How's your kid doing at school? Are you sleeping okay? Are you eating okay? Have you been to the doctor for a physical? There are so many instances where I talk to immigrant women at my clinic, or I talk to immigrant women that are in my kitchen, and I'm like, when's the last time you got your heart checked, or you got like a blood work panel? And they're like, oh, well, I haven't found a clinic that takes my insurance, or there's one close to my house. And I'm like, let's get on the phone right now, and I'm going to make you an appointment. So I want to plug La Clínica del Pueblo, because my clinic works very closely with them. Have y'all ever heard of this? La Clínica del Pueblo? Have you heard of this? Wow. So La Clínica del Pueblo is an immigrant-run team of doctors and nurses and medical assistants that take in any patient with or without insurance. Like, it's all pro bono. And there's obviously certain paperwork you have to fill out, and you have to meet a criteria and all that. But it is one of the only clinics that is focused on increasing health literacy for the immigrant community of DC. So I'm a big fan of what they do, because they make healthcare accessible. And every single thing that they have is translated into any language of the patient. So mostly Spanish speakers will go there, but there's also Amharic speakers and Mandarin speakers. So I just want to plug them, because I think that is an example of something that immigrant women that work there have worked really hard to do, which is building healthcare literacy is invaluable to the woman, who is usually the backbone of her family, if she's a single mom, and then all of her kids. I think within the food industry, I don't know if y'all have been to the Columbia Heights Metro, but do you see all those incredible vendors that are out? All of those people are immigrant, and a lot of them are women, and they are selling their tamales, they're selling their empanadas, they're selling jewelry, they're selling perfume. Like, it is beautiful to see that, just steps away from, a really expensive piece of avocado toast that you have right across the street, right? So I think there are a lot of barriers, which I know y'all have talked about a lot. I talked about these a lot, actually, in my defense to documentation status. So we never assume that somebody has papers, right? Language barriers. Like, listen, I am a very educated woman. I could not figure out how to permit my restaurant's streetery. Like, the DC website purposely makes it impossible for you to figure out how to get a little piece of wood that is this big, where approximately 12 people are going to eat, how to get that permitted so they could be part of my CFO, so that I could then sell liquor on that streetery. That took me like 6 months and several phone calls. And I speak English pretty well, and I could not figure it out. So I cannot imagine what the restaurant next to me, who is owned by Salvadorans, how in the world they're ever going to figure out how to get their streetery license if I can't figure it out. And so language barrier goes beyond the conversation. It goes like technology, right? It's figuring out how to pick up the phone and get to the right department. How do you talk to somebody from OTR? Because guess what? OTR and DCRA, they don't talk to each other. But they're right across the street from one another. But they don't talk to each other. So then you have to figure that out, right? So I think that is a major barrier. Also, funding. How do immigrant women get access to funding? Institutions with money want to give money to people that look like them. They don't want to give money to Black and brown people because it's more challenging, right? It's more risky because you don't really know. Maybe their credit score isn't that high. Maybe they don't have a credit score yet because they've only used a debit card since they came to the country. So funding is very difficult for somebody who just moved here and is navigating the system. Not to mention the rent in this city, not to mention how difficult it is to get from one point to the other. It's just so many things that are making it difficult for, again, basic needs to be met, that I think all these things have to be taken into consideration whenever we are working amongst immigrant women, and making sure that they have the same opportunities that we do. That I don't think will ever be the case, but I think making space for that is really important.
Yeah, and I like to plug in, and when I was putting this together, I was obviously very focused on like immigrants in the U.S. I recently had the opportunity to travel to Brussels, and I was cooking in Brussels, and in one of the events that I was doing, I had the opportunity to work with Chef Maria. Chef Maria, I was like, it was at this actually women's house called the Nine, and I'm like, oh, where I'm trying to make conversation. She was very nice. Like I was trying to learn about her, right? Going beyond like, hey, I need this shrimp, and like, like just beyond that. It's like, oh, where are you from? She's like, oh, I'm from Iran, and I'm like, oh, how long? She was very quiet, very reserved, I should say. She's like, oh, I'm from Iran. I'm like, have you been here long? She's like, no, a couple of years. I'm like, oh, how's Brussels treating you? And she's like, she just said, I'm happy to be here, right? And not really extending beyond that. And I'm like, oh, I'm a mother. I'm like, hey, do you have any kids? Again, I'm trying to make conversation, so a lot of prep happening. And she's like, yeah, I'm a single mother of two. And I'm like, oh, wow, I know you guys are too young yet, and probably don't have kids, but trust me, it is a lot of work. And, especially even more for like women in kitchens that, work very long hours. I'm like, oh my God, like two young children. I'm just thinking, I'm like, oof, like I rely a lot on my husband, for help, and just like trying to like figure out just even her schedule. And I'm like, oh wow, I'm not sure that's a lot of work. She's like, yeah, I'm a single mother of two. I'm like, I'm sure that's hard. And I can just see it in her eyes how kind of they like really like just kind of watered a little bit. And then she was like, I'm just happy. And she replied again, I'm just happy to be here. I didn't feel like at the time, like I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna push the subject. Obviously, there's a lot more. Her coming from Iran, being here not that long, but happy. She was like, I'm kind of good. I'm good now. Like I have a good job. And then later on that evening, from one of the managers, I learned a little bit more about Maria. She's like, yeah, she's so resilient. She was at a job previously that wasn't paying her fair wages. They were mistreating her. And kind of like, I was like, oh, that's awful. I'm so glad she's here now. And like, she's so talented. Like, I really admired like working with her because like, yeah, she wasn't super experienced, but she was very resilient. And like, she would find solutions and bring it to the table. Not honestly, a few days honestly go by, and Michaela, who was the manager, sends me a text. It's like, hey, I don't mean to like touch upon this, but here's like this GoFundMe for Maria. And I'm like, oh no, what happened? And then she's like, unfortunately her house got broken into. And I'm like, oh, that's awful. And then I actually like read her story that was like posted on that GoFundMe. And she fled Iran because her husband was trying to sell her children. Let's start with that. Like, imagine being a mother and your husband, because I guess they couldn't pay for their food, were trying to sell your children. So she flees from Iran, finds asylum in Belgium, with her two children, she just shows up with basically what's on her back, these two children. And again, food, she wasn't a professional chef. She just had a lot of resiliency, right? I need to save my children because they're gonna be taken away from me, and I don't care. I'm just gonna make it work. And her house that gets broken into, and then the money, they steal the money that was for her. Actually, funny enough, not funny, but just a coincidence of like her son's tonsil surgery. Which was awful. She had been saving up. She's in the EU but doesn't have, healthcare benefits yet. For her son's surgery, like, here's someone that in the last 4 years has been able to find her own apartment, find her way, put her 2 children to school, find a stable job, improve themselves. And that it just honestly broke me in so many pieces. I was like, this is absolutely awful. And then on top of it, you've gone through so much and your house gets broken into, and the money for your, the amount of challenges that ultimately these women have to go through, and the reason why they're there. The reason I'm bringing this up is because when people tell me that betting and investing in this woman is risky, are you kidding me? Risky for what? These women have gone through hell, living hell, and have still found a way to show up, be present, and succeed, and feed their families. And there's nowhere else I would put my money. Nothing has been handed to them. It's been obstacles after obstacles, and she's an example of someone that I got to meet. But that, there's millions of women all throughout the world in different situations, and it's just and on the funding piece, it's just when women like these want to start their own business, wouldn't you put your money on someone that has gone through so much? Because they don't have anything else to lose, right? So they will put everything and do everything in their power to make sure that succeeds. So I will challenge all these lovely white males that love to including me, no when trying to get money, for businesses, because it's just there's a lot of resiliency and that comes from these women. And I think it's important to share obviously the successful stories, but there's a lot that are not, because there's a lot of lack of access to resources, information more than anything.
Yeah.
So
Cool.
And with that, Maria, what do you think is lost within the voices of these women? Because not everyone gets, again, the opportunity to be in the great places like La Tejana, where they are able to speak up and talk about their experiences, or people asking them, again, beyond did you clock in and showed up to work? What's what would you say is and these voices when you're talking to women either at your clinic or at La Tejana, what are the things that people are not seeing in that first impression?
In the class that I teach at GW, I talk a lot about assimilation and Americanization and xenophobia and all of the things, nativism, that we see happening on a daily basis to immigrants or people of color in the country. I think there's a huge push for immigrants, specifically immigrant women, to be submissive to anybody in power. That can be their boss, that can be their partner, that can be somebody in a medical setting or a professional setting that is telling them what they need to do. So I think when we're talking about what is lost, I think it's a loss of identity that immigrant women feel. It's this loss of figuring out, who am I when I remove all of the BS that I've had to go through just to be able to wake up in the morning and feed my family. It's this sense of I am not American enough, I am not good enough, I am not white enough, And maybe the things that I have to say are never going to be taken seriously because I feel devalued in the way that I am treated in many places other than their job. Hopefully at their job they're not treated that way. I know at La Tejana they are not, but I know that they are treated a certain way as soon as they go into their kids' school. I know they're treated a certain way when they go see their OBGYNs. I know they're treated a certain way when they pick up the phone and they cannot place an order or they cannot talk to somebody because the person on the other end doesn't speak Spanish, right? And so I think one of the most powerful realizations that I've had as not just an educator, but a clinician and now a restaurant owner is when I interact with immigrant women and Latina women see me doing it, they're like, she did it, I can do it too. And that has been so powerful because I talk to my patients' parents. Many of them are single mothers that have taken 4 buses just to get to my clinic. Maybe they're 10 minutes late. It's all good, right? We're still going to see you. But I see the way that they look at me. And at the end of the session, it's usually that they never want to talk about their kid. They just want to talk about, well, how did you get here? Like, I see the way that you interact with me, and there's never this power dynamic. There's always this beautiful collaboration that's happening. There's a word in Spanish in Colombia when we say things like, oh, I'll help you. It's not yo te ayudo, it's yo te colaboro. And colaborar literally means to collab. And in Colombia, that is very deep because we're saying that what you bring to the table and what I bring to the table is equal, and we both need to be showing up to help each other. That word, I don't hear it a lot in other Latin American countries, but yo te colaboro is a really beautiful way of saying, like, you know, what you have is enough, and I'm going to help you with the ends that you can't really meet. And so when I think about all of the incredible conversations I've had with immigrant women that have 10 times more problems than I do, because we all have problems, and I have my own set of problems, but when I think about the things that they've gone through just to get to this country, right? Because as a border kid, everybody that I interacted with was undocumented. I had boyfriends that would roll up, cross the border, go to my high school, and then go back to Mexico every day. That was very normal in my life. Like, no one talked about papers. Nobody cared if you were illegal or legal. Like, those words didn't exist in my vocabulary until I moved to, like, Austin, right? Where people are very white and everybody wants to know, get in your business. And then when I moved here, and God forbid Boston, don't get me started on Boston. Oh my God, I will never, ever see that level of just overt racism in my life. But I digress, because I can have a whole panel on Boston. Thank you. Even if they would agree with me. Because the Boston people are always like, I know. So I think that just taking time to really understand why people may have difficulties listening or understanding or taking your advice or maybe asking for help, it's usually because they've been through some stuff, right? And I think you showing up, us showing up as immigrant women, doing things, and not just doing things, but also, like, we take the time to mentor. I think that mentoring is such an understated, important thing that you can do. If you are in a position of power or you are a leader of your community, take time to mentor and give back. I think that that is so incredibly empowering to, like, pay it forward. I know at La Tejana, we're doing a lot of pop-ups right now. So every month we're featuring a new chef from wherever. We just had a Yapingacho pop-up from Ecuador. The chef was from Ecuador and he's a bartender, and that was amazing because nobody knew how to say it. They were like, can I get one of those? I'm like, ya pingacho? And they're like, yeah, that. I'm like, ya pingacho? And they're like, yeah, that. I'm like, you say it, you know? And I just like mess with them when I'm at the register. But it's really cool to be able to pay it forward in that way. And so I think in the food industry, there are so many women that don't want to be in the kitchen all day. They want to open up their own spot. And one way that you can do that for them is say, hey, you can make family meal today. I want you to make those bomb empanadas that you've been talking to me about forever. And then maybe one day you can sell them at the restaurant. And then maybe one day we can have a pop-up with yourself. So just giving them that confidence and that platform that maybe they never had before. Because I do think, going back to the question, we really lose, immigrant women really lose their self-confidence, their identity, and their overall like being proud of where they're from, because this country forces them to assimilate. And not to get on a rant about capitalism, but capitalism does really affect your self-worth, because you think that your self-worth is tied to how many jobs you have. I am a product of capitalism, right? I'm trying to slow down. We're working on it with my therapist. But I do think that in DC specifically, there's a need to like do things, and everybody's like saving the world. So I think that that sometimes can be harmful to some women.
Yeah, and I want to end it with a task to all of you. You all have a way to help and a way to create impact, and that is as simple as those immigrant people of color within your communities, within your daily interactions. Just make them be seen. Ask them, go beyond just like, we good? Like really ask them where they come from, what their struggles are, how you can help, just even listening, just making someone feel important, feel that they matter, changes as their whole dynamic. It goes beyond, we have to go beyond the basic human rights, right? And being able to get these women out of that survival mode and getting them to a place of just self-worth, right? And just that's the way we're gonna help them and really contribute even further within our societies, because the impact that they have is tremendous. And if we just give them a little bit more support and make them feel be seen, and hopefully get to a path to legal status at some point, that will address on the hill. But there's little steps. I always, from my first seminar, say like, yes, citizenship would be the goal. It would be a dream come true to many immigrants, but it's also highly unrealistic for a long time that we're gonna agree on so many ends. But there's a lot of small steps that are very impactful that we can do on our daily lives, and that do change that dynamic and contribute. So opening for questions.
Yeah.
You mentioned mentorship, so I was curious, how did you figure out who your mentors were and how many did you have while you went on your journey? So who were your mentors? And how did you how many did you have?
I can start. I actually originally I didn't have many mentors. I think the reason being was because I didn't have anyone that looked like me that I felt comfortable like asking for mentorship from. But I think it's incredibly important, like having someone that can help you navigate. I think as actually now, I would say later on in my career, I now have a few mentors that have helped me keep progressing. But I would say it's kind of like later in my career rather than starting off. But it was partially due to the fact that I would look around, it's just like, there's barely any women, and forget like women of color and like positions of power within, at my industry, the restaurant industry, where I could ask for guidance. So I think, support and also contribute to that mentorship component moving forward. Like, I mentor for Empowered Women International, the James Beard Foundation, Women Leadership Program. So like through different organizations. And again, sometimes you just need, it doesn't have to be, I also want to like clarify this, because I feel like sometimes, like, how do you choose a mentor? How do you kind of even get close to these people? And sometimes it's just about like a coffee break. It doesn't have to be the most formal like setting from the get-go. It's just like, I want you to be my mentor from the very beginning, because I feel like it's actually something fairly personal. Like you have to connect, I feel like, both ways. But and also there's a big time commitment. So like for busy individuals, it's like you have to make sure that you kind of level set. So sometimes just asking someone that you admire or like, their career path, just, hey, can we have coffee sometime? Can I get 30 minutes of your time? And like establishing that relationship and making sure that, you like them beyond like what you think you do. And it's like, hey, am I going to learn from this person? And then it's like, being, I would say, appreciative and being like, oh, thank you so much for your time. We could have another session. Because I feel like sometimes it's intimidating on both ends. If someone from the get-go says, hey, can you be my mentor? It's like, okay, wait a minute. Like, you know what I mean? Like, which is, it's for me, that's a big responsibility. For me, it's like, okay, I'm going to help you and hold your hand. And it's just important, like, but having those small breaks and establishing that relationship, I think, is very important. So I don't know if it's how many mentors, but more like the quality of time spent. But,
Yeah, I mean, I'm still very intimidated by the restaurant industry because my background is in the medical field. So I was also lost looking around. I'm like, who do I ask for help? Because nobody looks like me. Nobody really seemed to have time to talk, because restaurant owners and chefs are so pressed for time and they're tired. They don't want to hang out with you after a shift. And they also some of them don't wake up super early, right? And we're in the breakfast industry, so my husband is out of the door at 5 a.m. But Daniella was definitely one of my mentors, like 100%, because I saw her doing things and I was like, okay, I think she and I could be more than just business friends. And we met actually over the woman that introduced us, or the one that allowed me to have a pop-up at her space at Fami. So Simone had a brunch, and it was Daniella, and it was the owner of Arepa Zone, Gabriela, who's also a immigrant woman herself, has a very successful business, and Simone, who's the owner of Fami, and me. And I remember I was so nervous because I was like, look at these big shot women in the food industry. They all have these beautiful restaurants, all these locations. They're obviously killing it. And I was just serving them my little tacos from my pop-up. And Daniella actually called me like a month later and she was like, do you want to have a pop-up at one of my bars? I was like, what? You want to sell my tacos at your bar? She's
They're
like,
pretty delicious.
yeah. I was like,
I secretly just wanted to eat more.
I was like, well, she must have liked them. So that's when we started to hang out more. Daniella has helped me so much to understand what a good deal is and what a bad deal is. She also read through our lease when we signed our restaurant, which was so nerve-wracking because we wanted to make sure that we weren't getting, I'm not going to say the word, but you know what I mean. And I think that there's been a lot of mentors for La Tejana. I have to shout out Chef Danny Lee from Anju and Chaiko. Gus and I and him are very, very close. We talk to him a lot about business stuff. His lawyer is now our lawyer. So I think the worst thing you can do is not reach out, right? Because like Daniella said, you're going to get turned down a few times. But if you do more of an informal, like we would just show up to Danny's restaurant when we knew he was there. And after he would finish cooking, we would have a drink with him, and we would just ask him a bunch of questions, and he would answer them, and they would be so valuable for us. And keeping those people really close to you are so important because they want to see you win. They want to help you, and you should never be too afraid to just be like, hey, I just want to pick your brain for 5 minutes. I'm freaking out about this problem. You know, my basement flooded. I don't have any help. I need somebody, whatever, pest control, whatever you need. The restaurant industry is incredibly generous in that way, and they will, most of the time, help you with things like that. So I do have to shout out Daniela. She's helped me a lot. She still does. Yeah.
But I think any industry, quite frankly, like people, I think it's how you like. Again, I think everyone's very busy, and like I've overheard some people, and as far as mentors, like, oh, I just don't know the time commitment. Like they don't want to overcommit. So I think again, starting, overall, hey, like, can I have 5, 10, 15 minutes?
Right.
Like, sure, let's grab a coffee. Like I think it's a lot easier, and then like start building those relationships.
Any other questions?
It's about, you mentioned checking in with immigrant women and just asking them beyond the generic questions. But I know that from personal experience with immigrant women in my life, oftentimes they don't like to be asked questions. You just hustle and you don't talk about it. So how do you approach them in a genuine way without appearing to be, like a savior or the goodness of my heart?
I think it's all about your energy and the vibe that you put out whenever you're interacting with them. I know better than to ask an immigrant woman, like, how is your day really going? Because at any given time, that could be a very sensitive question, right? They could be having the worst day of their life. They could have just found out that their brother got deported. They could have just found out that their kid had to have tonsillectomy, whatever the case. I think it's consistency in how you show up, right? So if you're like hot one day and you're cold another day, that's not cool, right? That person's not going to trust you. But if you show up every morning, and it can even be as subtle as saying, buenos dias, good morning, how are you? Every time you walk into your establishment so that they know, she saw me, I'm here, I saw her, and slowly you start to build that relationship. I guarantee you, if your energy is genuine and you really care about that person, they will open up to you eventually. I think you do have to be careful, right? Because you don't want to ask people, tell me the most traumatic thing you've ever been through, right? Like, no. But I also think it's consistency in how you show up, your energy, your vibe. And if you are genuinely trying to make a connection with them, they're going to feel that. And if you're not, they're going to feel that too. You agree with that?
No, I 100% agree. And, and kind of going back to Chef Maria, when I told the story on Brussels, like, that's why I'm like, okay, I need not to ask more questions, right? Like, it was just like, you have to read the person, like, it takes time. And I think it's doing little things that build trust, letting them know that you trust them as well, and there was one thing, at the end, like, she was super grateful, like, when we were picking up the dishes, and it was like my menu, and she was helping me, but she's like, oh, what do you think if we do this instead? And I'm like, sure, let's do it. And she was like, really? And it was like that, like, you're taking my advice. And then later on, it was like, you have no idea how much that meant to Maria, that you let her have, like, that her voice was heard, and like she had input on something. I was like, I'm like, fine, like, obviously I wasn't gonna do something that compromised the dishes, but she told me her goal, like this is her. I was like, this is her kitchen. I'm here, with her, but this is her kitchen. Like, I wanted to make sure that even again within her menu, it was like, it felt like a collaboration, right? But I think that small thing that honestly, I'm looking back at it, I did not do it with that purpose. I'm not gonna say, oh, I did this so she would feel this, but no, it was just a genuine interaction of like, but it meant so much because she felt seen, that I think then it really like opened up and like allowed for more trust to be fostered, and like I think that component is very important.
Yeah, your actions always speak louder than your words, right? Good question. I like that question. But yeah.
So I saw that you talked about your mom and the dinner thing, and then how you applied it to your work. Were there any other things that I guess growing up in your community, you incorporated in your work besides that part?
Yeah. Yes. So I was lucky enough to grow up in a extremely Latino community. Everybody spoke Spanish, if not as their first language, as their second language. So it was very important for my parents to foster like a tío and tía situation because we were the only family that moved to Texas. Everybody else moved to Miami and Brooklyn. And so my dad and his 3 kids and his wife were like the oddballs that chose South Texas. They were like, why don't you just go to Miami? And my dad's like, I hate Miami. I'm like, no. And they were like, okay, whatever. And so I didn't really grow up with family. It was just like us. And so every single Friday, without fail, my father would go to the local butcher and he would buy like all these ribeyes and he would have a carne asada at my house and we would invite like every Colombian that ever existed in like a 25-mile radius. And my dad just like met at the store, was like, oh, come to my house, we're having a Colombian carne asada. And that slowly evolved into like Venezuelans and like Costa Ricans and like then we got people that didn't speak Spanish at our house. But it was like every Friday night I knew that I had to be home for that, right? And so I think I've always grown up with community. I've always leaned on my community for anything. All of those women that I grew up with on the border of Mexico and Texas, they were all at my wedding. There's like 15 of them. And they all showed up looking gorgeous. And everybody was like, okay, Real Housewives of McAllen. Like they were all decked out. And I think I've always just felt like I can be trusting with people because I have that in my life. And it was beautiful. And I talked to like my husband and he's like, I never had that growing up. Like my parents would have like dinners. My mom would make like lamb chops and we would invite like some corny couple over and I would be forced to talk to them. But we didn't have like pachangas, you know, like my dad would be pouring wine, people would be dancing, there would be music blasting, people would end up in the pool. That was every single Friday there was a party. And so I'm so grateful for that now because I want to do that with my future family whenever I have kids. I think it's so important to rely on those people. So I think that at La Tejana,
I was going to say, you have parties all the time at La Tejana. I think you definitely incorporate
yeah, I was just going to say, like, if you go to La Tejana on a Saturday or a Sunday, like, it is a party, okay? Like, the music is, Bad Bunny is blasting, Eladio is blasting, J. Cole's blasting, everyone's dancing, even the people in line that hear it from outside, you just see them with their babies, they're dancing, the dog is dancing. So it's just a happy, happy place full of life. I want people to feel that every time they come into any space that Ana Maria is a part of. It's like that life. And we just went to the Bad Bunny concert together on Tuesday, and it was amazing. We were just talking. I really think I lost my voice in that concert still. I was screaming so loud.
We carried the party forward, you know.
They did. We had to show Benito we were there.
I know.
So, Lord, that's a great question.
Well, we think you're not our guest today. This is your final seminar, but your time with Sine is not over. You're now an official alumni fellow, and we have enjoyed this semester so much with you. Today you opened up your business, you've opened up your relationships, you've been nothing but transparent and very thoughtful about your conversations, and we so appreciate you.
And thank you for being creative and allowing us to try something different, like bringing students from campus to your neck of the woods and to support you. And I just wanted to let you all know, if you want to come to the end of year party on April 26th, Colada will be catering that for us. So if you liked what you had here, we can keep it going. But thank you again so much. It's been such an amazing personal experience to get to know you. And we're going to continue the conversation for sure. So thank you all so much. For the bus comes, so I think they